Good evening, Detective Sergeant Walter Crowd. Hardly a nice night tonight, but you don't appear to notice or care. You look a bit dead, but we know you're not. Although perhaps you'd honor us with an explanation. And that explanation would be the start of our tale. The tale of the Funeral Barge. The Funeral Barge. Oh my God, I wish I'd never heard of it. Even the first night I felt death all around me. Not just the death of being surrounded by decaying corpses, but the knowledge that horribly spat on my spirit, disgustingly tortured my soul. My black notebook starts at 10 o'clock that evil night. It starts as I'm thrown like dead weight onto other limp, lifeless beings whose body odor filled my nostrils with disgust and teasingly threatened to revolt my stomach. Then came much chugging, and the long, black, floating relic of old England's waterways came into sight, silhouetted by the white moon, its fetid decks filled with human remains. The engines lulled as it docked at the small wharf. Low voices gutturingly choked the night air. Notes were swiftly paid over. The three crewmen turned and blinked through the rain to see us lying in a heap. Corpses lying in pools of muddy Thames water and their own cold blood. They came over and picked up our feet, began to walk back to the barge, dragging us. Our heads bounced along the wet boards, collecting splinters and slivers which stuck into our skulls. At dockside, they lifted us one by one like sacks of garbage, lifted us over their heads and threw us to 15 feet onto the deck top, where we landed on soft, oozing remnants of bodies, bits of forgotten life that grinned, teasing mocking smiles at the newcomers, as if we'd come to keep them company. The rumbling, chugging from below deck churned to a steady groan, which bounced the bodies surrounding me, heaving them, pulsing them like they were alive once again. The crewmen said nothing. They sat, staring like zombies, unsmoking, undrinking, unliving, paying no heed to the corpses, ignoring the stench that filled the night air. The lifeless barge seemed merely to drift knowingly in the direction of the slow-moving river. In a pilot house near the back of the barge, a man stood with the rudder wheel in his hands. It did not turn or seem to move. Neither did he. This has happened before. This death barge has been floating downriver, stopping here and there to pick up corpses. I was sent aboard, posing as a dead man to find out why. To find out where it goes and why. Sent by my employer, Scotland Yard. To learn if the reason was legal or otherwise. At 5 a.m, the sun began to rise. The horror barge detoured into an inlet. And a sight glutted my eyes I can scarcely ever forget. A castle out of hell that rose like some macabre, growing thing. Grew out of the water, grew and breathed, and as it yawned, a black hole in its gut slowly widened to welcome its crawling, seething, sickening, horribly heaving food, which floated upon this bizarre barge, now aimed like an archaic arrow at the disgusting, squalid stomach of that great carnivorous castle. Although the sun was now high, the light began to slowly die in the grotesque gray opening into which we now crept. Inside, there was utter silence, only once broken by the sudden noise of the barge hitting the stone dock. A modern mechanical lift loomed over us, dropped like a fetid claw, and climbed onto several bodies which it lifted into the air and let go over an ugly little cart, customarily used to compound compost. Back it came, again and again, lifting limp human corpses and dumping them into the compost heap. Then, as it returned for its final load, I felt my heart leap into my stomach and my mind begin to go mad, for the silver mechanical claws caught my arm and clenched and dug into it deeply. I began to scream and dug my teeth into the arm of a neighboring passenger to prevent the bellow of horror that would have spewed from my throat. Then the cart was pulled by the shrouded things into the grotesque corridors of the castle. The bodies bounced on the cart as it passed over the cracks in the stone floor, and we became finally bathed in the light of utter, inhuman depravity. The hungry things grabbed at us, pulled, clawed, then slithered into corners with their choice of foodstuffs. They were vampires. Somehow, I got to my feet. Somehow, I began to run like hell. They came after me, chuckling and smirking and chortling, blood-clotted bits of human flesh dripping from their mouths as they ran down that black corridor after me. I grabbed a torch from the wall of the dungeon, thrust it into the face of one of my pursuers. His head went up like a match. His ancient body writhed and fell apart before my very eyes. Somehow, I managed to reach the grand entrance of the horror house, and there stood a massive coat of arms, possessed of haunted wretchedness by its departed creator. I lunged at it, ripping the gleaming blade of the sword from its mount, and turned to face the grinning vampires. As they closed in upon me, I turned and lunged at them. I turned and hacked. Even with my dying breath guard, I hacked. I hacked and hacked until I finally fell beneath them. My body limp, my mind now long dead. Whatever vampire remained undead carried me away, dragging me once more by my feet across the cracked stones into the chill night air, until once more I beheld the barge, that damned funeral barge. They dragged me on board, and the crewmen said nothing. They sat around staring like zombies, unsmoking, undrinking, unliving, paying no heed to the corpses and ignoring the stench that filled the night air. The lightless barge seemed merely to drift knowingly in the direction of the slow-moving river. And in a pilot house near the back of the barge, at last I regained my feet, and there I stood with the rudder wheel in my hands. It did not seem to turn or seem to move. And neither did I.